Ramatuba says a preliminary report on the cause of the bus crash that claimed 42 lives on the N1 near Lowe Trechad will be released within 48 hours. The vehicle overturned and rolled down an embankment after the bus driver allegedly lost control yesterday. The bus was traveling from Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape province en route to Zimbabwe and Malawi. Ramatuba says fatigue may be the cause of the incident.
Officials from the traffic department, we've got RTMC, they've already started with the work of investigating, and they've reassured us that within the next 48 hours, they will be giving us preliminary report. The fact that the bus was traveling from PE up towards Harare, you can't rule out a fatigue. You can't rule it out. Even probably maybe if you were two drivers, you were exchanging, but you can't rule out the fatigue.
South Africa's Border Management Authority Commissioner Michael Masiapato has joined the people of the country and the neighboring states of Malawi and Zimbabwe in mourning the loss of the 42 lives. Rendani Ralipaswa reports.
Masiapato says he's extending condolences to the bereaved families and wishes those injured speedy recovery. Masiapato says there is an urgent need to strengthen the safety and security of all people who traverse the borders. Masiapato says the BMA remains committed to working closely with the Department of Transport and the Cross-Border Road Transport Agency, law enforcement agencies and regional counterparts to ensure that the standards of cross-border transport are continuously monitored and enforced. I am Rendani Ralipasa in Polokwane.
Lastly, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has welcomed the release of Israeli hostages after more than 700 days in Hamas captivity in Gaza. The UN chief will attend a peace summit on Gaza in the Egyptian Red Sea resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh later today. Sharon Bryce Peace reports.
Guterres said he was profoundly relieved that the 20 living hostages had regained their freedom and would soon be reunited with their loved ones after the immense suffering they had endured. He reiterated his call for the release of the remains of the deceased hostages and urged all parties to build on this momentum and to honor their commitments under the ceasefire to end the nightmare in Gaza. He said the United Nations was working to support all efforts to end the conflict in Gaza and alleviate the suffering of civilians amid increased humanitarian access into the devastated enclave.
Recapping on your top stories, Madagascar's President Andry Rajoelina is no longer believed to be in the country after being flown out of the African nation on a French military aircraft. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Ntsintsi.
ABC News, the African perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, Sawa Ugandan Jacob Kiplimo wins big at the Chicago Marathon, while the National Basketball Association returns to China for the very first time. We'll tell you why at the bottom of the hour.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. Welcome to your Monday edition of Africa in Business, keeping you abreast of all the top developing stories in the world of business. Coming up this afternoon, we'll be having our usual FNB feature. We'll be looking at the mining data that came out of South Africa, the latest coming out of Malawi. This follows the annulment of many boards, especially those in parastatals, by the newly minted president, and also the latest from the PIC, having put aside a sizable amount that will go towards the development of early stage mining, not only in South Africa, but on the rest of the African continent. Looking forward to hearing your views, as well as sharing what's happening in your neck of the woods as far as business is concerned. Any major transactions that you believe we should be focusing on, any deals that you'd like us to interrogate, please do make contact with us. You'll find us on all the various social media platforms on X, Instagram and YouTube. We are at Channel Africa 1, and on Facebook we are at Channel Africa.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business. Deliver key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
It is exactly 10 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. It's time for African parliaments to transform political will into concrete action against illicit financial flows. That's the key message emerging from the African Parliamentary Network on Illicit Financial Flows and Taxation Continental Conference. That's currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. It's held under the theme, A Decade of Combating Illicit Financial Flows and Advancing Tax Justice, Reflection, Innovation and Political Will. Channel Africa's economics reporter, Innocent Simosa, has more.
The gathering brings together parliamentarians, policymakers and experts from across the continent to assess progress and chart a stronger path forward. The discussions are centered on how African countries can better safeguard domestic resources, strengthen accountability, and ensure that wealth generated on the continent benefits its people. Mr. Francis Kairu is the TJNA Senior Policy Officer Flagships and Coordinator for Africa Parliamentary Network.
UPNIFT began 10 years ago as a small network that brought together only 5 countries. And less than 10 members. We have since then grown into a network of 41 countries. For the first time in history, we also have the 5 regions of Africa represented. That is monumental growth in numbers. It is also monumental growth in the breadth of issues that we are covering. It is also a confirmation that indeed the partnerships that we have built along the way are critical for purposes of helping us tackle IFS.
He also urged members of parliament to turn political will into real action against illicit financial flows.
Exactly. That political will without political action will keep us where we have been. The projection is that if we do nothing now, is that illicit financial flows will grow to around $250 billion within the next 5 years. If we put in some action now to back the political will that we are seeing, we will have the possibility of bringing back around $50 billion every year. Money that could go directly into our economies, money that would help us, do what we need to do for our infrastructure, for our schools, for our health. And it will also give us peace. As you know, there are countries now that do not have peace because of power cuts or water cuts, failing education standards. So we'll have peace and a more prosperous Africa. How do we get there? Much political will with proper political action.
Kairu says legislators have a crucial role to play in negotiating unfair tax treaties with multinational corporations. He further explained the significance of integrating a body like the African Parliamentary Network on illicit financial flows and taxation into the continent's legislative framework.
If UPNIFT could legislate, one of the things that we could be able to do very quickly is be able to tackle cross-border illicit financial flows. As people may know very well, is that apart from the illicit financial flows that leave Africa, we also have a lot of illicit financial flows between our borders. And if we could be able to, for example, tackle it at a regional level, because we are already coordinating at a regional level. We already have regional economic communities and we collaborate. If we were able to do that, that would be excellent.
Meanwhile, South Africa's Member of Parliament, Vuyolethu Zungula, has emphasized the importance of strong parliamentary oversight in restoring and safeguarding Africa's sovereignty and dignity.
Criminalizing the facilitation of IFFs, including the enablers in the law firms and the banks and the auditing houses, and most importantly, ensuring that parliamentary oversight over each and every international tax agreement. No treaty should be signed in the dark. If Africa's parliament move together on these fronts, will not only close the financial leaks, will restore the dignity of our fiscal sovereignty.
As the conference continues, participants are calling for greater collaboration, stronger policy implementation, and renewed commitment from African parliaments to curb illicit financial flows and ensure that Africa's wealth truly serves its people. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Simosa in Johannesburg.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 15 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Now, just over 2 weeks after Peter Mutharika was sworn in as Malawi's president, his government has dissolved all boards of parastatal organizations and state-owned enterprises. Days after the dissolution of the boards governing state-owned enterprises, the Department of Statutory Corporations issued an immediate blanket suspension of all recruitment and major procurements across all parastatal organizations and state-owned enterprises, saying that the move is aimed at preventing irregularities during the governance vacuum. For more on this, we're joined on the line by our correspondent in Malawi, George Mhango. A very good afternoon to you, George. Good to have you with us, and good Monday to you. Are you with us, George? All right. No response coming through from George. I will try that line again and see if we can get a good connection from George. I did actually hear it drop there. So we'll take it back to our producers and be back with you in just a moment.
Annie Kalonji sur Channel Africa.
Comment est-ce que les militants et sympathisants du parti Les Transformateurs ont-ils réagi face à la condamnation de Succès Masra?
La condamnation de Succès Masra ne nous a pas surpris et les militants transformateurs ont été bouleversés et indignés étant donné que le verdict est un verdict lourd, illégal, injuste et donc face à la répression dans laquelle le peuple tchadien est confronté, les militants transformateurs se sont résignés de ne pouvoir pas sortir manifester. Et donc, c'est une situation totalement absurde pour un pays. Et aujourd'hui, nous célébrons le 11 août, fête de l'indépendance. On pensait que le verdict allait être plus ou moins clément, mais le verdict est sévère.
Annie Kalonji, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
African Enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 17 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we connect once again with our correspondent in Malawi, George Mhango. George, good afternoon. Welcome.
A very good afternoon to you too. Thank you very much.
So quite a dramatic and emphatic move here made by Peter Mutharika. The reason for the dissolution of these boards is stated as trying to prevent any irregularities from taking place during the vacuum period. So did the government then give any timelines as to when the boards will be appointed? Are they looking completely at new boards, or are there possibilities of reappointments of previous board members?
What government has said clearly through the office of the president and cabinet is that the boards are totaling 77. Have indeed the leadership has been dissolved. And this definitely means that all operations are not going to happen, be it procurement tasks, be it recruitment tasks, and be it approval of different, suggestions or decisions. Those have been halted. And of course, this is not new. It was precedented. Why? Because even when Lazarus Chakwera was sworn in 2020, he also dissolved the boards. So in terms of dealing with embezzlement of public funds or corruption, this, according to political economists, has come as no surprise at all. But the question indeed is whether some of the chairpersons or executives in the boards will be, recalled to resume work. That definitely determines or is going to be determined by the appointing authority himself, because definitely all these kind of appointments are politically motivated. So that the DPP or the Democratic Progressive Party is in power, then definitely all those sympathizers of the current regime are going to be appointed.
So, George,
yes.
any indication of timelines? When do they hope to re-establish the new boards?
There is no timeline as to when these boards are going to be appointed, but what is...
All right, we seem to have lost our connection there with George Mhango. George, are you with us? All right, we've lost our connection with George, and while we try to re-establish that, I think what's quite important as well is to find out the motivations behind this particular dissolution of the boards. Was there previous evidence of mismanagement, or are these fears, misguided? Were there any financial irregularities or maybe suspicions of corruption in these various parastatals that have led to this particular move? We'll find out more regarding this particular situation as well as the dynamics in Malawi in just a moment when we reconnect with George Mhango. It's 20 minutes after 4.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Now, Channel Africa will be live at the 14th Oppenheimer Research Conference. That's a leading platform for natural and environmental science. It's convened by the Oppenheimer Generations Research and Conservation and brings together top scientists, policymakers, as well as conservationists looking to advance solutions to global environmental crises in an ever-changing world. Channel Africa is on the ground and will be interviewing some of the leading African voices who are shaping meaningful approaches to some of Africa's most pressing challenges. Do stay tuned.
In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Thulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Thulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Our correspondent in Malawi, George Mhango, joining us once again. George, when we were disconnected, I was posing the question of whether there is a valid reason behind the dissolution of these various boards. You did mention that a precedent has already been set, but has there been any evidence of corruption, of financial irregularities, of mismanagement that could have actually triggered this move?
At the moment, there hasn't been any, formal complaint from the board as to whether some of the officials were trying to siphon money or engage in corrupt activities. But, it's just a suspicion that whenever government changes any leadership that comes to the boards, one, to shut all the leaking buckets of water or financial inflows. And they also wanted to avoid some top brass in these parastatals from maybe employing their own loved ones or maybe channeling financial resources into their own pocket for their own gains. That's the only reason that the current government through the office of the president and cabinet has said, but they have not even indicated as to which parastatal was caught or is alleged to have abused the funds within the period of 8 days of transition at the moment.
You did mention that nothing's going to be happening in the interim, so no work will be done and no decisions will be made. But what type of impact will this have on the running of these parastatals and SOEs?
Number one impact that this will have is that any approval that has to go or to do with the government in terms of approval, maybe procurement of medical supplies, maybe procurement of other equipment for different parastatals, maybe health, education, that will not take place. And only if the board is fully constituted, that's when maybe government will be able to start, championing its decision. So that's the major impact that definitely, Malawians are going to feel at the moment. As you might be aware of the fact that there is just a new food assessment report which puts, say, 4.8 million people as having no food to eat. So without a board into the Agricultural Development and Marketing Corporation, ADMAC, which procures food, then food not be procured. Maize will not is not going to be imported. So those are just some of the definite, points that I can say will happen. But otherwise, everything that I'm talking about do hinge on the boards themselves to veto any decision. recruitment in the health sector, again, is not going to take place only if the board is really fully constituted. And that is why they say the Secretary of Statutory Corporation should be handling all matters, and all the recruitment and procurement procedures have been halted. But that's indeed a challenge. So,
and many of these functions are actually very time-sensitive functions, and some even veer on a humanitarian aspect. So it will become, prudent for the appointment to be expedient in order to avoid any disastrous repercussions from this particular dissolution. But how have the unions and the workers reacted to this move, which is actually of immediate effect?
Yeah, so on this one, I've been speaking to the trade union organizations like the Malawi Congress of Trade Unions. I've also been engaging the Economic Association of Malawi on this. What they are saying is that government should act with speed, and looking at the lean period, which needs food to be on the table, which needs government to procure maize. The government has to be fast in appointing the boards. And then what they are also saying is that, in other institutions, there is that lack of enough workforce, more especially in the education sector, health sector. So they say if nothing is happening at a faster rate, then Malawi is destined to be losing out on a number of issues. For instance, the Interpower Connector project between Malawi and Tanzania, which depends on Electricity Supply Corporation of Malawi to have more workforce. It means that is going to be halted. Even procurement of fuel from other countries, that is also going to be halted. Decision making as to whether to raise the price of fuel depends on the boards for the Malawi Energy Regulatory. That is going to be halted. So a great suffrage, and that is why these institutions or these trade unions, I think government has to be very quick in choosing this. But otherwise, what is happening on the ground is that government said they're working on it to ensure that within 2 weeks, at least, all these boards are fully fledged and are operational with people that have merit on them or in them.
George Mhango, we thank you very much for that update coming out of Malawi this afternoon. Thank you for your time. That's our correspondent on the ground in Malawi, George Mhango. Takes us to exactly 27 minutes after 4 p.m.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Now, in Cameroon, as the presidential election was held on Sunday with a few incidents, cocoa farmers have expressed their dissatisfaction due to a combination of falling commodity prices, which have caused debt, and a bean quality crisis. Now, the harmonization of prices per kilo of cocoa has been problematic since last year, and they are now demanding a solution from the Ministry of Commerce. Cocoa farmers are a vital part of the country's economy, producing around 300 metric tons annually. Pamela Kumba reports.
About 50 kilometers from Yaoundé, the Cameroonian capital city, and more precisely in Meki, cocoa farmers claim that the price per kilo was set at 4,500 francs CFA, which is about $8 by the Ministry of Trade. But it has been selling well below that. Sylvestre Malgloire Onana, farmer and member of the initiative Commune Cocoa Farmers Group, explains.
We have many problems compared to last year. This year, we find ourselves at ridiculously low prices. We started with $8 and end up selling to $3.72 francs. We are surprised by this price. We are waiting for the trade minister's message, who has said practically nothing till this date. We are simply told that the price is unchanged. This doesn't suit the farmers. We are lost. I think people are a little discouraged. And somewhere, they even say that there is abuse from the ministry. I will not fail to point out that in some way, the minister had a word to say because we only know that the price of cocoa was lowered, but we don't know by whom and why.
Sylvestre Magloire Onana said the farmers intend to take the matter to the Trade Ministry office after the elections, expecting a change and a better response from government. Pamela Kumba for Channel Africa in Cameroon.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African Time. We take you to the markets desk, where Chanduko Ligege is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. $1 is trading at 17 Rand 48 in South Africa, Botswana 13 Pula 19, Namibia 17 Namibian dollars 48, Zambia 22 Kwacha 52, Kenya the dollar is 127 shilling 736, Ethiopia 146 beef 708, Uganda 3,000 shilling 400, Tanzania 2,000 shilling 426. $1 in Nigeria is 1,000 naira 461. In Egypt, the dollar is 47 Egyptian pound 51. Tunisia 2 dinar 92. Algeria 128 dinar 74. Morocco 90 ram 14. Angola, the dollar is 912 kwanza. In Congo, 2,360. Looking at commodities, gold is at $4,088. Platinum at $1,650 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $63.39 a barrel. That is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And from the sports desk, the business of sport with Musiburi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the sports desk. So Jacob Kiplimo, the world record holder in the half marathon, ran the 7th fastest marathons men's time in history at the 2025 Chicago Marathon this past weekend. In his second ever marathon, the Ugandan Kiplimo won the men's race in a time of 2 hours, 2 minutes and 23 seconds, covering a distance of about 26.2 miles. Now, he took home $100,000 for the win yesterday. Meanwhile, Kenyan Amos Kipruto, who finished in second position, took home $75,000. And while his countryman, and then Alex Masai of Kenya earned a cool $50,000 for finishing in third position. Meanwhile, American Connor Mantis was a fourth position in that race. He got $30,000, but for being the first American through in that home marathon, he walked away with $15,000 extra. In tennis news now, Coco Gauff overcame Jessica Pegula in 2 competitive sets to win the 2025 Wuhan Open. But just how much prize money and the ranking points was much at stake in that encounter. So Gauff secured $596,000, a paycheck for winning her third career WTA 1000 event, while Jessica Pegula collected $351,000 for her runner-up position. Meanwhile, Arina Sabalenka as well as Yasmin Paolini, who fell in the semi-final stages, earned $180,000. The 4 beaten quarterfinalists Iga Swiatek, Elina Rybakina, as well as Katarina Sinukova, as well as Laura Sugmund, all walked away with $83,000 for their efforts. Meanwhile, surprise Rolex Shanghai Masters finalist Arthur Rindegan, as well as Valentin Vetchofort, have also walked away with a sizable prize money for the ATP Masters 1000 event that concluded this past weekend. So the Frenchman, that is Valentin, walked away with about $1.1 million for winning the Shanghai Masters, and he had entered that tournament, by the way, having earned just a total of $594,000 in his career, and now one can say he's officially a millionaire for winning yesterday's championship. Well, the National Basketball Association returns to China for the first time, and with the two Macau games this coming Friday, and the impact now extends beyond the preseason. So the weekend also marks a major milestone for the NBA as years of rebuilding its relationship with its second largest market culminate with the Phoenix Suns as well as the Brooklyn Nets facing off in the Vatahan Arena on Friday. For the NBA, it could also mean unlocking future growth in China as television viewership declines in the USA. The NBA's return to China also comes after a 6-year hiatus following the 2019 comments by Daryl Morey, then Houston Rockets general manager, voicing support for Hong Kong protesters as well as setting off an international crisis. So for the next 3 years, the league was largely absent from Chinese airwaves in China. Nearly every Chinese sponsor cuts ties with the NBA. But the NBA's history in China dates back to the 1970s, and since 1979, the NBA and the USA basketball have played a total of 48 games in China. That's according to the NBA data. So demand for the 2025 Macau Games set for this Friday up until Sunday was high, and at the upper end, tickets are going for about $3,000. Let's hear now from the NBA Commissioner Adam Silver.
Amazing fan base in China. Certainly, well, we didn't play here for several years. We never really left. I mean, our games were televised here the entire time, and interest has continued really unabated in the games themselves.
Now, Silva also elaborates just more on the partnership they have established now with the Chinese Basketball Federation, which will help grow the sport in the country.
It's interesting. We announced a partnership with the Chinese Basketball Association today. They have a league here that's known as the CBA, and they also run the national team. And when we have this new rookie on the Portland Trailblazers, Young Hansen, into the league, they know they need to continue to generate more high-quality players.
Right, so that concludes your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 37 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we turn our attention now to the South African Reserve Bank's quarterly bulletin for September. It has shown that household debt decreased slightly in the second quarter of 2025 as households' disposable income increases at a faster rate than debt. However, many households still rely on credit to cope with high living costs, leading to more borrowing for everyday items and services. For more on this, we joined this afternoon by Aaron Mulosi, Strategic Brand Development and Marketing Director at Focus One Capital. A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Thami. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, good afternoon and good morning, anybody else in Africa.
Yes, so we are actually on different time zones, so great consciousness there. So let's look at the ratio of household debt to disposable income. It did change in the recent quarters. What does this suggest about the consumers' financial health of South Africans?
You know, a lot of South Africans work very hard to try and make a living, and obviously access to credit has always been a problem in terms of how to qualify in terms of the minimum, whether it's wages or salaries that they receive from their employers. So we Focus One Capital, we bring a solution that says we are here to repair your credit. And by repairing your credit, we must be very clear. We are not clearing people's debt. We are not saying that we're going to make sure that you access credit if you don't qualify because of the way you handle your finances. But we say that we are here to make sure that your credit health is legit and your credit health is the way it's supposed to be. I'll give you an example, Thami. Most of the times, when we look at your credit score, for instance, you find so many errors where some people might have either, to open accounts and that you never really paid attention to, or you might have some small accounts that you haven't settled. So we look at all the different areas to clean up your credit score and your credit health so that you can be able to now afford proper and decent credit and be able to afford something as basic as a home. So that's what we're bringing as a solution as Focus One Capital.
When you look at the interest rates, there have been some movements over the past year. And how can consumers leverage the interest rate cuts to help reduce household debt?
Okay, in terms of the interest rates, obviously, because we're not a credit lender and we do not necessarily negotiate with the creditors to give you a specific interest rate, what we do as Focus on Capital is that once you've got a specific X, and they say to you, if you pay over 24 months or you pay over 36 months or however long that the agreement or the contract becomes, we then are able to advise you to say, look, the best way is to pay it within this specific time or is to negotiate this minimum repayment. We have a client actually recently who has been just sitting and dilly-dallying because she's afraid of how to approach her creditors, which is a lot of the problem for a lot of South Africans. We were able to negotiate minimum repayments with her creditors, and within 4 months, now she managed to buy herself an SUV, to buy herself a car. So essentially, as Focus One Capital, our main mission is to say, before you even take credit, please understand what credit means, and please understand what interest rate means. So over and above the fact that we're able to repay your credit, we're able to say, come through to us, have a consultation with us, let us teach you and make sure that you understand how credit works in South Africa at the moment. Because many of us do not access credit, not because we can't afford it, but because we don't understand it. And there's also a basic fear of, so we are here to mystify the whole approach to what credit is and how credit should be and how you as an individual or as an SME, because we do provide solutions for SMEs as well. How do you keep your credit healthy and be able to access credit properly and manage it? But the most important thing is to manage it so that the creditors are happy, you are happy, and you can be able to access even more credit that will enhance your life.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to leave it at that for this afternoon. Certainly the type of information that consumers can use in order to build their financial muscles and be able to handle their finances in a more responsible way. We thank you so much for your insight this afternoon.
Thank you so much. Go to Focus One Capital, find more information. Get hold of us. We're here to help you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. That's Aaron Oloisi. He's the Strategic Brand Development and Marketing Director at Focus One Capital, taking us to exactly 4:42.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
Now, South Africa's Public Investment Corporation, known as the PIC, has announced its plans to fund early-stage mining opportunities, with half of those investments to be made in South Africa and the rest of them on the rest of the African continent. The PIC has set aside around 78 million US dollars, that equates to about 1.35 billion rands, and this is all to be invested across diversified commodities, geographies and development stages. The Investment Corporation says this initiative is part of its commitment to driving economic growth, fostering responsible investing, catalyzing minerals of the future, and enhancing South Africa's global competitiveness in the mining sector. For more on this, we joined on the line by Lucky Payne, Executive Head for Research and Project Developments and Fund of Funds at the Public Investment Corporation. So let me see if I've got this. Is it Lucky Payne, Lucky Pane? Lucky Pane, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Thami. Lovely to be here, and you got it right. It is Lucky Pane.
I was looking at that. I'm like, is this a pain? Is this a pane? You know, I'll hit it both ways. But thank you so much for that. So let's get straight into it, Lucky. And if you could take us through the objectives behind the funding for early stage mining initiatives.
Yeah, thanks, Thami. I mean, if we look at what South Africa attracts from global exploration budgets, As of 2023, we only received 0.9% of global exploration budget. Government is targeting 5% or 12 billion per annum. And then secondly, mining exploration in South Africa has been declining since the 1990s. And without exploration, the decline in the mining sector is expected to continue. And we also foresee that at least about 48 mines are expected to close in the next decade, according to a study by the University of Cape Town. And with more mines expected to close, a lot of rural jobs, thousands of them, are going to be impacted. So that is just the SA backdrop, right? In contrast, global exploration for commodities aligned with the just energy transition has actually doubled in the last 7 years, with Australia and Kenya, or rather with Australia and Canada, leading that work in terms of mining exploration. So from where we are sitting, unless we start investing in minerals of the future or your critical minerals, the mining sector in South Africa is going to continue to shrink. It will impact jobs, but it will also impact our export earnings. The mining sector is actually the biggest earner of export revenue for the country. So we need to take deliberate action to revive the industry and invest in minerals that will be critical for the future.
And take us through, if you would, the selection criteria for the projects that will be allocated funding. And you mentioned, obviously, these are commodities that will be beneficial in the future. Can you highlight which those are?
So from a commodities perspective, and Thami, these are commodities that are going to be used in electric vehicles, in the green hydrogen economy, in clean energy. And these commodities include the likes of graphite, lithium, copper, cobalt, manganese. Some of them we have here in South Africa in abundance, but others actually are found on the rest of the continent.
And the selection criteria for the project?
Yeah, so in terms of the selection criteria, I must also emphasize that we will actually not be investing directly into projects, but we will be investing in specialist mining funds or private equity funds that have exposure to mining, as well as then forming joint ventures with mining companies that are doing work around early stage mining projects. The criteria that we will use for the fund managers that we are looking at, one, we'll be looking at the investment strategy, the strength of the team and the experience of the team. Mining is quite specialized, so you definitely need people that know what they are doing. Geography as well, ideally as indicated, a portion of the allocation needs to go to South Africa with some exposure to the rest of the continent. We'll also then be looking at the type of commodities that they'll be looking to invest in, target returns, as well as the instruments that they'll be using.
You did highlight the rationale behind looking and funding, projects in other countries as well. When you look at other countries on the African continent, which ones are being considered, and how will you be assessing the country risk?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at, for example, Zambia and DRC, they have a lot of copper and cobalt. And then when you move on to Malawi, they've got high deposits of rare earth minerals, whereas Tanzania and Madagascar would have a lot of graphite. These are but some of the few examples. And depending on where most of the minerals are found and how the funds will be structured from a geographical perspective, The idea is to have exposure to South Africa as well as countries that are abundant in these minerals.
Lucky, we'll leave it at that for today, and really looking forward to seeing what comes out of this particular initiative and the funding that's going to be put aside, and hopefully it will help mitigate those risks that you highlighted earlier on in our conversation. We thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, Thami.
It's been a pleasure. That's Lucky Pane. He is Executive Head for Research and Project Developments and Fund of Funds at the Public Investment Corporation.
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa. It's gone 10 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time as we host our weekly FNB slot. And today we look at the latest mining data coming out of South Africa, as well as the country's currency gains. Joining us this afternoon is senior economist at FNB, Siphamandla Mkhwanazi. A very good afternoon. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Thami. Good evening to your viewers.
So let's start off with the latest mining data that's coming out tomorrow. Could we be expecting any encouraging numbers?
Yeah, so the bigger scheme of things, the mining sector hasn't been doing really well for this year. We are around about 2% year to date below the output of last year. But in the last couple of months, Thami, we've been doing pretty well. We've seen momentum picking up in the mining sector, particularly around the PGM's output, and the reopening of a mine there in the Northern Cape is also another supporting factor. So we do think that we are going to see another positive print, which will signal that the mining sector is likely to contribute positively to the third quarter GDP. So bigger picture, the mining sector isn't doing so well, but it's been picking up in the last couple of months, and we expect that to extend into this month's print.
All right, well, we'll see what the data says as it does come out. Let's turn our focus now to issues of consumer health. Retail sales data will be released later this week as well. Expectations on that front?
Look, so this is one of those where our emotions versus what we end up doing at a shopping mall are diverging. So we saw last month, and I think we did speak about it, that consumer confidence came out relatively negative. I mean, it's been going down since last year, suggesting that consumers aren't feeling that great about the state of the economy, and they're saying that they don't deem the current environment to be conducive for them to engage in big ticket items. But when you get to the mall, they do something different. We saw last month, retail sales increasing in real terms by around about just over 5%, and that is something that is not normal when you look at the data in its longevity. And what we are seeing there, Thami, is also something interesting, that there is a slight shift from your necessities, and we're now starting to see your non-discretionary items starting to pick up. So your jewelry, spending at jewelry shops, online shops, spending at hardware, something that is also starting to recover now, which it's also linked to lower interest rates as well. So there's a little bit more rands in the pockets of consumers, and they're deciding to outlay, to buy those bigger things at hardware as well, especially heading to the festive season.
And talking about the rand, let's wrap up with that and give us a profile of the country's currency gains.
Yes. So the rand has been doing relatively well. One of the best performing emerging market currencies. It's supported by, a rise in gold prices, and South Africa being a major exporter of gold is benefiting from that. But in the main, Thami, this is more about the weakness of the dollar rather than the strength of the rand. There are factors that support a stronger rand, but the biggest driver here is the weakness in the dollar. So we expect that we will approach that 17 rand mark towards the end of the year, which when combined with relatively low oil prices is good news for consumers, especially those that fill up at garages, at garages heading to the festive season.
Sipamandla Mkhwanazi, always a pleasure. Have yourself a splendid day further.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. That's Sipamandla Mkhwanazi, Senior Economist at First National Bank.
The 14th Oppenheimer Research Conference is fast approaching. Convened by the Oppenheimer Generation Research and Conservation, it's one of Africa's leading platforms for natural and environmental science, enabling young researchers to mix with experienced trailblazers to help translate their research into real-world solutions. From the 15th to the 17th of October, attendees will discuss topics ranging from land management, biodiversity, to wildlife economies. Channel Africa will broadcast live, spotlighting some of the African voices, shaping meaningful approaches to some of Africa's most pressing challenges.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
It is exactly 4:56 Central African time. Just a quick recap of what we brought to you today. An interesting development around the availability of early stage mining funding. And this is put together by the PIC, that's South Africa's Public Investment Corporation. They've announced a $78 million investment into mining. This is not going to be limited only to South Africa, but other countries as well on the African continent. And also the situation in Malawi with the parastatal boards being dissolved. And we did hear from our correspondent, George Mhango in Malawi, that this is expected to be rectified within a period of around 2 weeks. As we know, some really critical decisions cannot be made while those seats are vacant and there is no board. So we'll keep you abreast of developments on that front. But for now, we hand over to Vue d'Afrique with Joël. Bonjour, Joël.
Bonjour à toi, Thami. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa sur Vue d'Afrique tout à l'heure. Merci déjà de rester connectés parce qu'on va parler du discours à la nation qui est annoncé ce lundi soir à Madagascar. Et donc, on parlera également des opérations de dépouillement en cours au Cameroun au lendemain de la présidentielle, mais aussi de la présidentielle 2025 en Côte d'Ivoire. L'opposition appelle à manifester. Merci de rester connectés. Merci, Thami.
Merci beaucoup. That's how we, as the Africa in Business team, bring it to a fold for this Monday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you join us tomorrow as we update you on the leading and developing stories on the African continent. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the entire team, you have yourself a splendid evening further as we hand over now to the French desk and Vue d'Afrique.